Okay. So as other times, I put a break in the recordings to give you time to really stop and think about that. I'm sure a lot of you have something to say. But this is what Augustine says in response to that. Remember, he's just seen the fall of Rome, and the world that he knows is in chaos. And he looks around and he says, okay, things are pretty bad now, but really, things have always been bad. So without Rome being able to have effective police, there's more crime. And he says, yeah, but there's crime when Rome had power. And he said, oh, without Rome being able to trade goods and services effectively, there's more starvation and famine. And he goes, yeah, but there was starvation and famine before. So this is 1425, and this will be sort of our pivot to some of the other themes. Augustine asks there, he says, is it even possible to be perfectly happy in this world? With all the bad stuff in this world, and these are things we see in book 22 again, is it even possible to be happy in this world? Now, we have to be very clear on the very specific question that Augustine asked. Because if we just say, can you be happy? You're going to say, yeah, right now I'm listening to my favorite professor, favorite ever. I've got goosebumps because of how great this lecture is. I'm sort of joking around. That would be pride, wouldn't it? But anyways, you're like, yeah, I was happy 2 days ago. Yeah, happiness is possible. What Augustine says, though, is perfect happiness ever possible in this life? Another way to put this is, in pride or sin, is it possible to get everything you want and need through your own labor in your own hands? And Augustine says no, because he says to be perfectly happy, and perfectly is the specific point I want you to not forget here. He says you'd have to get everything that you ever wanted. He says you can't get everything you ever wanted. Now, I bet a lot of you are saying, well, okay, for my 8th birthday party, I didn't get a pony. Still a little bit pissed at mom about that, but okay, it didn't ruin my life. So you might be thinking, who cares if we can be perfectly happy? The specific question you're trying to ask is a dumb question. Who cares? You might say, well, the real question is, can we be sometimes happy some of the time, right? And the answer to that's probably yes. But Augustine says, no. You're missing the point. He says, at every moment, you're partly unhappy, whether you realize it or not. And you're thinking, you don't know me, Augustine. There's been times when I've been perfectly happy. And this is what Augustine says. He says, to be happy is to get what you want. Makes sense? To be unhappy is to get what you don't want, or to have something that you want taken away from you. So once more, to be happy is to get what you want. Good definition, sounds like. To be unhappy is to lose what you want or being prevented from getting it. And just sort of do a mini pause here. Do you agree with that? Do those sound like decent definitions of happiness and unhappiness? They sound pretty good to me. And this is what Augustine says. He says, okay, we're going to do a quick poll. Who in here wants to die? Crickets. Nobody's raising their hand. Okay, so Augustine says, nobody wants to die. Unhappiness is getting what you don't want. Every one of us is going to get death, but none of us want death. So all of us are unhappy at every moment, knowing that we're going to get death. So once more, I want you to see that that is a philosophical argument. You don't have to be Christian to accept that. And regardless of the other things, that's just sort of a mini argument. He basically says, what's the definition of happiness? Getting what you want. What's the definition of unhappiness? Getting what you don't want, or having what you want, like life, taken away from you. Also, knowing that that's going to happen would make you unhappy. So if you've got your PlayStation and I haven't taken it away yet, You turned your homework in late, so I'm gonna ground you. I'm gonna take away your PlayStation. Okay, and I haven't taken it away yet, but I say, as soon as you turn in that late paper, I'm gonna take your PlayStation 4 and I'm gonna throw it out of the 10-story window. Before you lose the PlayStation, you feel crappy knowing that you're gonna lose it, right? Well, all of you know that you're gonna die someday. If you didn't know that, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. Apologies. But we're all going to die someday. None of us want to die. So all of us know that we're going to get something we don't want. To know that something that you don't want is going to happen, or to know that something you want, life, is going to be taken away, makes you somewhat unhappy. Now remember, we have to be specific here. He asked what it would take to be perfectly happy. It would be to always get everything you want and to never lose anything you want. So what he's saying here is none of us can be perfectly happy in this life because the most important thing we have, we're guaranteed to lose. You probably want to live more than anything else. You want to live more than you want your PlayStation. You probably want to live more than to hang out with your friends. Whatever it is, you want to live the most. That's the one thing you're guaranteed to lose, though. Or sorry, let's just say you are guaranteed to lose that most important thing. And here's the other thing. When you die, you lose everything else that you want. So this is sort of a downer, but this is what Augustine says. And once more, we can make it float sort of independently of specific religious claims. He would say, the human condition is marked by the fact that we're going to die. And even when you're not paying attention to that, it's in the background, you know it, and to say that it sort of spoils the party is a bit of an understatement. So, we can't be perfectly happy in this world, because even if our beautiful house isn't broken into by thieves, and even if our family has long lives, perfectly happy, all that. Okay? Even if you get to hold all those things your whole life, you will lose them in your own life the moment you die. And that is inescapable. So that's why Augustine says, even if you're rich, smart, good looking, have all this political power, can do whatever you want, you're still not perfectly happy. Because you know you're going to die, and no one wants to die. So then we just finish the thought. If you want to be happy, you can't get that yourself. You can't get it in this life. Perfectly happy. You can't get perfect happiness from yourself. You can only get partial happiness. Because you know you're going to die. You could get perfect happiness, though, if, hypothetically, there were a way to live forever. Well, that's heaven. So Augustine says, you have no chance, whether you're religious or atheist or confused about where you stand, of being perfectly happy in this life, because you know you're going to die. But if there were a way to live forever, heaven, then you have the chance of being perfectly happy once you get to heaven. So that's how you ought to live. You could live for this life. And as Augustine says, you could live loving this life as if it was the highest thing. But that will only get you so far. You'll always, always hit a wall eventually. So you could live for this life and get imperfect but very real happiness. Or you could live for heaven, for God, for others. And then you hold out the chance and the hope, the faith, we might say, that you'll one day be perfectly happy. And so that's our segue to book 19. That's Roman numeral XIX, book 19, chapter 20. This is what Augustine says. He says, this world is not evil. Right? In the same way that your body is not evil, your body does not force you to sin. This world is not evil. just because sin happens in it. But it's not perfect either, right? This world is not perfect. So this is what Augustine says, and I think this is a good quote, and it's a great way to think about the world. He says, use this life, but don't love it. So use the things of this world that come into your life. Use political power to help other people. Use riches to make yourself comfortable. Fair enough. But don't love political power more than you love other people. Don't love it more than heaven. And don't love your own personal comfort, say, more than the basic needs of other people. Right? So use the things of this life, Augustine says. Money's not evil. Political power's not evil. Use them, though, in the way you'd use a tool. And when you wouldn't choose a tool over your own life, right? We can use the PlayStation example again. PlayStations are great. Video games are fine. But if it comes down to your life versus your PlayStation, PlayStation is just a machine, right? It's just a tool. You're going to kick it out the door without a second thought. What happens, though, is in this life, we get so fixated on the actual goodness of things in the world. PlayStations, sex, food, wine, gladiator battles, UFC championship fights, that we take them as if they're the most important thing, when really they're just things. So we devote all our time in this world to chasing down more money, better looking friends, more power, whether that's through money or a fancy job title. And Augustine says none of those things are bad, but you're chasing them as if they're more important than your own life. So one way I could put it is this, and this will sound really snooty and mean, and you feel free to push back and say no, right? Say, what's more important to you, education or money? And then ask a similar question. If you're religious, what do you think is more important to God, education or money? Well, right there, we're already going to have a split for a lot of people. Money's more important to them than education, but they understand that their religion says that education is more important than money. So think about it. For a lot of you, not for all of you, but for a lot of you, you're going to college in order to get a degree. But why are you getting a degree? So that you can get a better job, so that you can make more money. So one way to think about this is you're already showing that you think money is more important than your life, because you're spending 4 years, give or take, of your life in order to get more money. Now, some of you are going to school because you're passionate about social work or nursing, and you're doing nursing not because it's an expanding part of the economy, which it is, but you're doing it just to help other people. And that's great. Some people, though, surely are only going to school in order to get their name stamped on a piece of paper so that they can make more money at a job that they hate. So Augustine says this is what sin is in general, and it's also how we waste our lives in ways that we wouldn't necessarily call sinful normally, but he would, is that we misprioritize things. We put work, which is boring, over seeing our family. Or when you could be studying Augustine in college, or philosophy, or ancient Hebrew, so you can read the Old Testament, right? Instead of doing those things that are probably pretty important, we study something we don't have any interest in because we read in the newspaper it's a growth industry, and we'll make an extra $10,000 a year until we die and lose it all. This is what we do. We constantly misprioritize things. We don't call our parents on Sunday. We watch reruns of Road Rules or whatever. I've been watching a lot of Family Feud lately, right? That's what I do on Sunday instead of calling my mom. I watch Family Feud, right? Or we prioritize money and we say it's for our family, which is a nice excuse a lot of people use. But then how do they spend it on their family? Or why does an 8-year-old need you to have more money if you're already out of poverty? So this is the kind of thing that Augustine is good for. You notice you don't get a lot of this is what sin is, this is what you have to do to be good. He doesn't tell you how much you have to tithe or how often you have to volunteer. He says, if you choose yourself over other people, that's sinful. If you think that what you want is more important than what God told you to do, that's sinful. And then he doesn't come out and attack you. He just says that's the way it is and wants you to stop and reflect and ask yourself, what are your priorities? Do you really pursue your priorities so that the most important things come first in your life? And some of the time, all of us do. And a lot of the time, all of us don't. So that's what Augustine wants you to do here, is reflect on your own values, what you think is most important. Is that actually what you pursue first and last every day? Probably not. So again, the official way he formulates it is things that we should merely be using or doing because we have to, because you have to have money. We're doing as if we love them and as if they're more important than our own lives. We confuse our priorities. So now, Book 19, Chapter 24, you might have thought this section was a little strange on Rome. Why is he having us read this, right? This is why I'm having you read it. He says, a community is defined by the things they love in common. Once more, like his definition of happiness, may not be the way you've always thought of what it means, but it seems to be a pretty good definition to me. A community of people are defined or united by what they love in common. So now the question I ask you is, what does the United States love in common? That is, what defines the U.S. or what unites us as a country? Because you can only be united if you share something all together. Right? So if I drew a circle, if we were in the same room and I drew a circle around some of us, we would be united, those of us in that circle, because we, even though we're each in different spots in the circle, we share that circle in common. Right? Or if you love the NFL, right? You have that in common with other fans of professional football. You're united in some way by that love of American football. Okay? So let's ask about America in general. Not about ancient Rome, but about contemporary America. What, if anything, unites us? So I'm going to give two answers. I don't necessarily believe them, but I'm saying them as a provocation to get under your skin, to work you up so that you say something. I'm going to say there's two options, realistic options of what America loves in common, or what would be a love that unites America. The first one is say nothing unites us. That means we're not a united country. We don't have anything in common. And we just go about our day-to-day lives separated by picket fences, separated by cars because we don't walk around and talk to people anymore. And we're not actually Americans, all of us, but there's Chris, and there's Jane, and there's Kylie, and there's Bobby, and we don't actually have anything in common. We're not really neighbors. We're not really brothers and sisters in Christ. We're not really patriotic Americans. It's just me, me, me. Like I said, I may or may not believe this. I'm saying it to provoke some of you. The other option would be, okay, we do have something in common. In fact, we do have a common love that motivates most of us and sort of defines America. It's money. It's money. And so for either of these, then what I would say, again, I don't necessarily believe it. It's definitely a very cynical view, but cynical doesn't make it wrong. And say, if nothing unites us, there's nothing going to keep us together, we're headed for a downfall, like Rome. Or we could apply it to money too and say, just like Rome, if we can scoop up as much power and money as we want, you're still just scooping up sand to build a sandcastle. So one day, whether it's another stock market crash or somebody hacks I don't know, the Federal Reserve, who knows, right? If all we can count on is money and political power, if that's what unites America is this love of money, well, when that goes, poof, America goes, right? So again, I want those to be sort of dark questions and themes. They shouldn't be easy to wrestle with. And just know, I think if your answer is just too quickly, no, that's not right. And if your answer is just too quickly, yeah, that's right, I want you to think more about it. Okay? I want the question to provoke everyone, not just those who disagree. So, moving on, book 22, chapter 21, so that's Roman numerals XXII 21. We see one of the places, there's more in this book, where Augustine says, look, if you read the Bible and you think about the general way the Bible works, like the sort of logic or how everything fits together in the Bible, you'll see that we have to have a physical body in heaven. There's lots of ways to think about why this might be. One way Augustine says is, minds are one kind of reality, and they're good. Thank you, God, for giving us minds, so we can know things. Free wills are a part of our mind. It's also good we have free will, because even though you can use it for sin, you can use it for all this good stuff, like choosing to do your homework on time and, you know, all the other good stuff you can use your will for. He says, okay, but bodies are a very different kind of reality, right? Now remember, he already said bodies do not cause sin. Bodies never make you sin. So they're not evil in and of themselves. And actually, more than just not evil, bodies are good. So minds are cool, they can do stuff like know. And wills are cool, they can do stuff like choose. But if you could know and choose and you didn't have a physical body, just think about down here on Earth, it would suck, right? Or at least there'd be something missing. Let's be a little more formal in our language, I guess. There would be something missing, because there's things a body can do, like build things, harvest things, that a mind and a will by themselves cannot do. So these are some of the reasons, and once more, this is logic. You don't have to know ancient Greek so you can read the New Testament. You don't have to know Hebrew so you can read the Old Testament. You don't have to be a Bible scholar or even be Christian to believe this. He says, minds are good, and there's certain things only minds can do. Bodies are good, and there's certain things only bodies can do. Bodies also don't make us sin, even in, say, sexual sin. It's still a choice to use your body that way. So he says, A, bodies are blameless. They're not evil. They're not full of sin. B, they're actually pretty great. They do all sorts of great things that only physical bodies can do. So then, using sort of logic and argumentation, he says, if there were a heaven, and if heaven is a good place to be, you can't just be a mind in heaven, because you'd be missing out on whatever some of the goodness that bodies can bring to you. And you don't have to worry about bodies bringing sin into heaven, because they don't bring sin. It's actually your choice. Your soul choosing is what brings sin. So once more, so long as you believe in heaven, that's just an argument that you don't have to have a whole lot of specific religious commitments about. If God gives you good stuff in heaven, and if bodies are good and not evil, then why wouldn't God also give you a body in heaven? Okay. There's some specific scriptural claims there that he points to, but like I said, that gets into theological details very quickly. What I'm trying to do is maintain it at a sort of ethical, philosophical stance. So that's sort of surprising. I wouldn't mind hearing from some of you in the discussion board if that's something that you knew that Christians think, if that's surprising to you, if it's easy or difficult for you to wrap your head around having a body in heaven. And just so you know, Augustine says, okay, it's not going to be the exact same body you have now. He says some people lose a hand in this world. Are they going to have their corpse body in heaven, like a dead body missing a hand? No. Okay, so what are they going to have? And he says, hey, I don't know, right? He says, even if you read the Bible very closely, you don't get a really clear answer. Let's all be good in this life. How about that? Then we'll find out what our heavenly body looks like. So it will be somehow different than the body you have now, but Augustine thinks that it will look like you. It'll probably still have 10 fingers and all that, but I don't know, you probably won't have to clip your fingernails. It'll be a lot like the bodies that Adam and Eve had in Eden. Because think about it, this is the final point I'll make, or the second to last point I'll make, is that heaven, in a sense, is just restoring humans to their state before the fall. That's the religious way to think about what heaven is. It's not some other place exactly, but it's a return in time to what we were before we started acting so sinfully. In less specifically religious ways to think about it, if you believe in a heaven or an afterlife, it's not getting past all the human sin, like an escape from it, but it's sort of passing through it in order to finally realize our perfection. We can sin, but what something like a very generic, non-specific version of heaven would be is where you finally free yourself of all that sin and realize your full potential, doing what you really want, not getting distracted by shiny things like money, right? Really nailing your full potential and doing only good stuff for the first time. Like I said, realizing the potential that was always already there in you, just as in the more Christian-specific thing, it's about returning to the perfection of Eden, in a sense. Okay, so that was my second to last point. And here's my last point. I'm going to end with another question. Book 22, chapters 22 and 23, Augustine says two very different things. He says, this world is filled with horrible things. It's filled with rape and murder and incest, and dogs who are our favorite animals get rabies. Children die before they've had their first birthday. This world is a vale of tears. It is horrible. And he says, hey, that's what I'm telling you. The rich still get sick, the healthy still lose their money, and all of us die in the end. This world is jacked. It is seriously messed up. And if you live only for this world, you'll get what this world has to offer. Sickness, theft, death. So you better live for God instead. And it's like, all right, that is depressing, Augustine. But then he also says, hey, this world is messed up because humans introduced sin into it. But God is nice. I mean, he's more than nice. He's infinitely loving, etc. So also in this world, there are untold joys. The bloom of a flower, the color of the sky, the slightly different color of the sky when it's about to rain and storm. And yeah, we get hungry, so we have to eat. That's one of the non-stop messed up things about this world. You always have to eat. But he's like, most food tastes pretty good. And there's always some new kind of good tasting food you haven't tried yet. So this is what Augustine says. He says, this world is wretched in one sense. In another sense, it's fantastic. What he wants to remind you, though, is that it's a mixed bag. It's not perfect down here on earth. There are bad things largely introduced by humans, but there are also good things largely introduced by God. Right? And so I guess the question, it's sort of a vague one, but does what Augustine said here, not necessarily your own views and your own religious views, but what Augustine said here, does it strike you as optimistic or pessimistic? Do you think he overrates this world? and forgets about all the bad stuff? Or do you think he underrates the good stuff? Okay. Is he too optimistic or too pessimistic? Or maybe, just maybe, he hit it perfectly on the head. Okay. So that's our final question. That's Augustine. As always, if you have any questions, email me. Thank you, everyone.